Well, good morning. We had an interesting morning this morning as we picked up an extra unexpected visitor. It's called a nail in our tire. And I saw my front tire, the pressure was going down. So we pulled over, pumped it up, and our car, praise the Lord, is parked out front here. And God got us here. Amen. It is a good day. So my name is Brad Horne, and let me just tell you a little bit about myself before we get started this morning. I grew up in Dallas, Texas. I'll try not to say y'all this morning. I became a Christian at 9 years old. I told a couple of people this morning my testimony. It's an incredible testimony, how God worked in my life. Went off to Baylor University, studied business, wanted to become an entrepreneur, start my own business. But God had other plans for me. Just a slight detour of 27 years. So God took my wife and I and our 4 daughters overseas to Russia and to Ukraine. And yes, we have a friend who was killed on the Russian side, and we have a friend on the Ukrainian side who was injured. So continue to pray for peace over there. Every day, lives are lost. And so let me just show you this picture. This is a picture of the last church we started, and you're looking in the room out toward Red Square. I'm not sure if you can see in the picture, but that is St. Basil's, which is located in Red Square, right across from the Kremlin. We started the closest Protestant church to the Red Square and the Kremlin. We baptized just 50 yards away from Red Square, 4 stories down in a sauna with the coldest water that you've ever been in. But that was life. In 2016, Putin made it illegal for a Christian to share their faith with an unbeliever. Illegal. But my friends, they would go out from our church and they would go out to Red Square and share their faith. And I said, do you know the consequence if you get caught? And they said, yes, we do. We've counted the cost. We've counted the cost. So we were your IMB missionaries in Russia and Ukraine for 27 years. So thank you for giving to missions. Because you gave, we were able to go and to serve and to start 10 churches. And most of them are still going today. So thank you for giving to missions. In 2019, God called us back to the States. We came back to this area unexpectedly, but God knew. And I became the director of missions for Keystone Baptist Association. We have 37 churches in this area, South Central Pennsylvania. And so I go to a different church every Sunday. A lot of people say, well, what church do you go to? I say, I go to 37 different churches. So, but it's a lot of fun, and I have a great time. I want to put up this next picture of a tent. We have this tent, and so you can use this tent. We put it up in fairs, festivals, and carnivals, even a pig roast. And so it says the ultimate question. And last fall, we used this in many different towns and cities. And I gave out 1,200 of these $1 million bills last fall. And I would give them, and people would take them. They know it's fake, but they like to have it. And so I'd give it to them. And I said, do you know what the $1 million question is? And they would always say, no. I say the $1 million question is, when you die, will you be in heaven? It's the fastest way I know to get into a spiritual conversation. And what do you think the answers were? We were talking earlier this morning, about 25%, about a quarter of the people said, yes, I know I'm going to heaven because Jesus died for my sins. What does it say about the other 75%? I heard answers like, I don't know, maybe, I hope so, we'll see. This should not be. Faith comes by hearing. That means they're not hearing from us. They have to hear the good news of Jesus Christ. Before we get started this morning, I just want to share on a personal note that in the last 11 months, we have had 3 weddings in our family. We have 4 daughters. And so we've had 3 weddings in the last 11 months. So God is good. He gave them all godly men to marry. And we were just a little bit poorer. Just a little bit poorer. Last year, God led me to learn a new word. It's always good when we're learning and growing, but I learned a new word. It is the word gospeler. Gospeler. Everyone say that right now. Gospeler. All right. It's gospel with ER. I'm a gospeler. You might not have known it, but you're a gospeler. Every Christian, every follower of Jesus Christ is a gospeler. And so we're going to talk about that this morning in our text. If you have your Bibles, would you turn to Matthew chapter 9, verses 35 through 38? Or turn on your phone or tablet or whatever you have, and it's also up here on the screen. That's Matthew 9, 35 through 38. And Jesus went throughout all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers, the workers, the gospelers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers, to send out gospelers into the harvest." In chapter 10, and he called to him his 12 disciples. Now, I want to study this text this morning and dig out all the truths in it and discover what we can find here in this treasure in this text. Reminds me of a story. My wife and I were invited over to friends. This was in Russia. And they had a special Russian dish there called pilmeni. And it is like a ravioli, I guess. So it's a meat dumpling. And so before we started eating, the lady said, "One of you is going to be lucky and find a treasure." And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? She didn't say anything else about it. And we started eating. And all of a sudden, I took a bite of one of the pilmenis, of the raviolis. And I found the surprise. She had placed a 1 ruble coin in one of the pilmenis. I found it. So it was hard as a rock when I bit down in that. But let's see what type of treasure we can find in God's Word. Hopefully it will be a little bit easier to digest. So in verse 35, who is it that went? Who is it that went? Jesus. Jesus went. He was missional, meaning he went to the people. He was not attractional, meaning we don't have any words in the Bible where it says that Jesus invited people to the synagogue. Now, people showed up because he was there, but he was missional. He went to the people. We can even say that he was incarnational. He was there among the people, going to them. Can we say that he was intentional? Yes, he was very intentional. What if you're not intentional? Is something going to happen if you're not intentional? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. We have to be intentional. You and I have to be gospelers. We have to be intentional about going. You know, I love the first 2 letters of the word gospeler. What is it? That's not biblical or anything. That's just a coincidence. But that's great. I love that. I'm glad it's not C-O-M-E. But we are supposed to go. You know, Jesus had a vision. He had a strategy. And he had a plan. His vision was to go, right? I've got to go to the people. The strategy, okay, well, I'll go to this town and that town and this town and that synagogue. Now I will go around and share the gospel. I'll be a gospeler. And then he had a plan. I'm going to meet my neighbor at 9 a.m. on Saturday morning, and we're going to have coffee. And I want to get to know my neighbor so I can share the gospel. That's the plan. So he had a vision, he had a strategy, and he had a plan. You know, it's not always about the destination. It's not always about the destination. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories. Pastor and I, we went to, he's from Mount Wolf, and we went down to the York Fairgrounds to see another pastor at the train exhibition, the model train exhibition. And so on that day, I put on a hoodie, and on the back of my hoodie, on my back, was printed the John 3:16. And so we were walking around, and my purpose was just to go and support the pastor who was there selling model trains. But a lady came up behind me. She tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Excuse me, sir, are you a Christian?" I said, "Yes, I am." She says, "Oh, good, I'm a Catholic." She gets out her cell phone and she shows me the statue of Mary in her front yard. And I said, "Oh, that's interesting." And I said, "But I think it's very important to read the Bible." What do you think she said? "Oh, I can't do that. My priest says that I will not be able to understand it." I said, "Sure you can. I read it. I understand it. I know you can do it too." And she said, "Really? You think so?" I said, "I know so." She opened her purse. She took out an envelope and gave me a pen. And she said, "Would you please write on the back of this envelope where I need to start reading the Bible?" So I wrote on there, the Gospel of John, start there. I said, John 3:16, make sure you memorize that. Oh, by the way, Ephesians 2:8 and 9, you really need to memorize that one. And so we filled up the back of this envelope with things that she needed to read. That was not my intention to meet her that day. So sometimes it's not about the destination. It's about the people as you go that you will meet. This pastor and I, we went out. They have food trucks there, and so we got some food, and we sat down at one of the picnic tables. And we had lunch, and we were talking about, I don't know, maybe it was God or the church or the Bible or something. And two men sat next to us. And they heard us talking about God. And they said, "Oh, what church do you go to?" And we told them, and they said, "We go to this church and that church." And they started to share about their faith. And then they got up and they left. And then two other men came and sat down next to us at this picnic table. And they heard us talking about God. And they joined in. It was like opening the door to a spiritual conversation. And they jumped in. See, a lot of times we're too scared about saying something about God or the Bible, and people feel like, "Oh, I can't say anything." But if we start talking about it, then they'll jump in. They want to talk about their faith. They want to talk about what church they go to and things like that. I went bowling with the youth group in Red Lion, and we were bowling. There was a family next to us in the next lane. And every time they got a strike, we would clap, and they would clap for us if we got a strike or a spare for me. And so, but we didn't really talk to them. But I was wearing our Keystone Baptist Association shirt. And after I finished bowling, I left to go get in my car, went to the parking lot, and they were waiting for me, which is not always a good sign. They were waiting for me, and they said, "What is that Keystone Baptist Association? What is that?" And I told them, and I asked them what church they went to. It opened a conversation. He said, I went to church, something happened, and I left. And I encouraged him to start reading the Bible again, that God could work in his life. Sometimes it's not about the destination. A friend of mine in Moscow, when we were living there, he said, "Let's go share the gospel at the college or university." And it was early in the morning, and he came by, and we went. And he said, "Did you eat breakfast?" And I said, "No, I didn't, because I got up so early." And he said, "Well, let's stop by McDonald's and have breakfast." And I said, "Okay." By the way, there used to be 46 or so McDonald's in Moscow. So we went by one of them and got in line. You're always getting in line in Russia, in a McDonald's. There are always lines with 16 million people who live in Moscow. So we got in line, and we're talking in English. And two men behind us who also speak English, they said, "Oh," and they introduced themselves. And that led to a 2-hour conversation about their faith. It was not planned, but it happened. As we go, you will find other people along the way. I would have never met any of these people if I had never gone. Think of all the encounters that Jesus had along the way. I researched it. Here they are. Samaritan woman, remember that? John chapter 4. Zacchaeus, a leper. Blind Bartimaeus, the demoniac, and the rich young ruler. Jesus was walking, he was going, and along the way he met others and shared with them. I have a question for you. Was Jesus going, was it a one-time event, or was this something he did regularly? What do you think? Regularly. That's right. It was not an unusual occurrence. It was a habit, and we can say that Jesus was intentional. Another question for you. Was Jesus trying to give an example to his disciples? Was Jesus modeling for his disciples? Yes to both. Yes to both. Do you know, as you go, as you become a gospeler and sharing the good news, and we're going to talk about how to do that, okay? So stay with me. We're going to get to stories, and I'm going to give you ways that you can be a gospeler. Any of you, as long as you know Jesus Christ, you have the good news, all right? So, yes, Jesus was trying to be a good model. And we see in chapter 10 later on, and we also see in Matthew 28 that he sends them out. He trains them up. He gives them a lot of ways that they can go, and he sends them out later on. He sends us out, by the way, also. So we need to be going out and modeling and discipling. We need to give the example to others. So let me ask you a question. Where did Jesus go to? Was it the fields where the shepherds were? No, it says what? The cities and the towns and the villages. You know, it's very interesting. The name of this church is Country and Town. But I see the city has come to you. It has grown up. Now you have Chick-fil-A and Taco Bell. The city has come to you. It is all around you. And Jesus went to the cities. That shows that Jesus had a strategy. He had a strategy going to where the people are. We have to go to where unbelievers are, right? We have to go, this is for believers, but we have to go to where the unbelievers are, like the 75% that don't know how to get to heaven. We have to go. And you might ask me, Brad, I want to go, but I don't know how to be intentional and where to go. I don't know how to do that. I want to talk to you a little bit about a third place. First place is your home. Second place is your work. A third place is another place. We'll say that. The third place is another place. It's not your home. It's not a work. Let me give you some examples of a third place. A cafe. I used to meet, when I was in Russia and Ukraine, I would constantly meet men in cafes to have a cup of coffee so I could share the gospel with them. I don't suggest this, but some people go to a bar. I don't suggest that for you. We do have a pastor, the biker church, and he goes to bars because that's kind of the people that go to his church, or people who used to be in the bar. You remember watching Cheers growing up? You want to go to where everybody knows your... That's right. And that's important, to ask their name. Ask them what it means. You know, something I use a lot is I ask people, when's your birthday? And everybody wants to tell you when their birthday is. And so I'll just use it for me. My birthday is November 7th, 1965. What happened 1,965 years before I was born? Jesus was born. My birth year, your birth year, is connected to Jesus' birth year. We can share that. We can have that as an open door for sharing. How do you get to the gospel? That's got to be important. Your birth year is connected to Jesus' birth year. Other places that are a third place, bookstore. I talked about a bowling alley, a park. Jacob Shetron and I, we went to a park, and we went up to ladies sitting there in the pavilion, and I just started sharing my testimony. I didn't ask. By the way, don't ever ask. Just start sharing. If they don't want to listen, they'll walk away or cut you off. But make it short. Make it a minute. Your testimony needs to be about a minute. You can be a part of a theater group, a fitness club, a flea market. I'm going to tell you about a flea market in Lemoyne in a minute, a laundromat, a sports event, among others. Those are third places. That's where we can go to meet unbelievers. Go to one of these third places. We have a pastor in Stewartstown, Dr. Tim Parker. He just got his doctorate degree. And so he was like, I don't know any unbelievers. I've got to go and find them. So he joined the volunteer fire department in Stewartstown. He went. He is a gospeler. And he went to this volunteer fire department to be able to share. That's his third place. What is your third place where you can share? A friend of mine named David Gwynn in Waco, Texas, back in the 80s when I was going to college there. He went to the football games, the Bear football games, and he sees this huge man, all muscle, on the sidelines, and he'd have this growl, we call it a growl towel, a yellow towel, and he would swing it, trying to get everybody involved, everyone to stand up and cheer. And David, God put this guy on David's heart. His name was Bob Fix, by the way, and put Bob on David's heart, and he didn't know how to reach him. And so he started asking around, where does he go and things like that. And he found out that Bob didn't work out on campus, although he could for free. He went out to a private gym and had a membership there. And he went there 5 days a week at 6 a.m. Now, you don't know my friend David, but he is not an early bird. He is a night owl. He would stay up till 2 or 3 or whatever in the night and sleep late the next morning. But he said, okay, God, I can get up at 5 a.m., and I'll go meet Bob for the gospel. I want to be a gospeler. So he went, and the first week, he just said, you know how guys do, hey. And then they started spotting each other. And before you know it, they're working out together at 6 a.m. Monday through Friday. And they're getting to know each other. And David shares the gospel with Bob Fix, and Bob becomes a Christian. It changed his life. Now we have a Christian who is speaking into all the athletes, because he was the strength coach at Baylor University, as a believer. And he shared the gospel as much as he could with those around him. Find your third place. We have to go to the cities and villages and gyms. Somebody you know, Jake, went to Lemoyne. Have you ever been to the flea market? Okay, all right. In the flea market, we went there and we got into 3 good spiritual conversations. And I'll just share with you the last one. We went into a used bookstore. I'm not sure if you know Jacob very well, but Jacob loves to buy old books, very old books. And so we go in, and there is a 20-year-old guy sitting at the desk, and he's stamping. And we ask him a question about the books. And then Jake goes over, and he's interested in all these old books. And I'm sitting there right in front of this 20-year-old. And I said, well, what's your name? Always a good way to start. What's your name? Noah. Noah? I love that name. So do you go to a church around here? 20 years old. No, I've never been to church. And I said, well, maybe your parents are Christian and they gave you that name. No, they're not Christian. And then I said, God, I'm out of questions. Give me another question. And I'm standing in this used bookstore. And I'm looking around at the books. I said, Noah, have you ever read the most famous book ever written? And he says, I guess you're talking about the Bible. I said, yes, the Bible. He said, no, I've never read it. But that led to a 45-minute conversation about God. At the end, Noah is asking Jacob, so how did God create the world? How did he do it? I want to know. We opened the door, and he was asking. Into the car after that time and of sharing, and Jacob said this. He said, I did not know you could get into those types of conversations. And I said, you can if you're intentional and you have good questions. Good questions always help. Janine and I, my wife, we drove to Hanover just to get into a spiritual conversation. We went to a Filipino restaurant, and the plan was to go there and talk to somebody else, sit next to them at their table and talk about the food. And that way we could get into a conversation. And we ordered, we sat down, and we sat down right next to another couple. And soon after that, they left. There's nobody left in the whole restaurant. We had traveled an hour to get into spiritual conversations. There was no one. Then the waitress came over. There was no one there, so the cook came out to talk with us, both foreigners. And it led into about a 30-minute conversation about faith in God and how they were living out their faith. That was not our intention. But as you go, God will give you people to share with. There was a guy named Chris from York. He goes to a church in York. And he was like, I want to share my faith. How can I do that? I said, let's find a third place, a block away from your church. So we can go there and get into spiritual conversations. So we go in, and we have a lot of quarters in our pockets. And we go up to a guy who just got there, and we said, we're from this church, and we would like to pay for you to wash your clothes and dry your clothes. Would that be okay? I said, really? Absolutely, that'd be okay. And it did turn out to be like $6. And so we did that for him. But that gave us the privilege, the opportunity to share with him. Jose was his name. He had just moved from New York, and by the way, he sounded just like Ray Romano. I mean, I wanted to ask him, can I? But I didn't, and we shared the gospel with him, and that gave us the opportunity. That was our third place. So, in fact, I talked with Chris this week, and we're going to go back again this coming Saturday. So, that is some things that you can do. What was common with every example that I gave you about being a gospeler? Were we intentional? Yes. Did we go? Yes. Did we have a plan? Yes, like our plan for this coming Saturday is to go to this laundromat at 3 p.m. That's my plan. Now, we might meet somebody along the way and talk to other people that will be unexpected, but that's what happened. Next question, what did Jesus do in the cities and villages and their synagogues? He taught, he preached, ministered to their physical needs, and we need to do that. We need to teach. We need to preach. Jesus modeled here in Matthew 9, but then we see in Matthew 10 and 28, of course, then he sends them out. A lot of people say, I don't want to push Jesus or my faith on someone. We're not. We're proclaiming it. Faith comes by what? Hearing. They have to hear it. They have to hear it. In South Central Pennsylvania, I was talking about the 75 who don't know if they're getting to heaven. Many of them wanted to know. In fact, I remember a lady in Greencastle. I asked her, what the $1 million question is, and I said, will you be in heaven when you die? And she said, absolutely. And I was like, well, what makes you say so? And she said, I'm a good person. I didn't ask her if she wanted to know what the Bible said. I told her. I said, well, the Bible tells us this. So proclaiming. I love that Pastor Phil read Psalm 96, 1 through 3. Sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, all the earth. Sing to the Lord, praise his name. Proclaim his salvation, how often? Day after day. Declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous deeds among all people. What's it say? Proclaim, declare. And that's from the Old Testament. Of course, you know what the New Testament says too. Isaiah 12:4. In that day you will say, give thanks to the Lord, call on his name, make known among the nations what he has done. Proclaim that his name is exalted. Proclaim. In Matthew 10:7, it says, when Jesus was sending out his disciples, he gives them these words, and proclaim as you go, saying the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Just as I did last fall in giving out these $1 million bills to over 1,200 people. Proclaim it. Now, I want to ask you to notice something. Let's look at this. Between Jesus going, seeing, and having compassion. Can you have compassion and then go? It's very difficult. My friend and I, before I went to the laundromat, I didn't have compassion. But when I met Jose there, I went and saw him and met Jose. Then I had compassion that he was lost like a sheep without a shepherd. Only when I went. So when we go and see, then we will have compassion. Most people don't share their faith because why? They don't have compassion. Well, you have to go first. And the compassion, just as happened to Jesus, then the compassion comes. And I will tell you that in 1988, I was being pulled apart. 1988, God was convicting me about going overseas. I didn't want to. And they said, we would like for you to go overseas to South Korea for 2 years. I didn't have compassion for them. I didn't even know one person from South Korea. But when I got there, and I see that they're Buddhists, they are sheep without a shepherd. And then the compassion comes. You're not going to have compassion until you go and meet them and know. I didn't have compassion for Noah at the store, but it came once I met him and got to know him. Now, this is very important. It is easier to act into a feeling instead of feeling into an action. Does that make sense? Let me say it again. It is easier to act into a feeling than feel into action. Let me give you a great example of this. Matthew 5:44 says this, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. I dated a girl for 4 years in college, and she broke up with me, and within a week she was dating somebody else who went to the same church, who was part of the same college group that I was a part of. And I know we're not supposed to hate, and so I really, really, really did not like this guy. So my pastor said, Brad, you need to pray for him. His name's Jeff. You need to pray for Jeff. And I said, I can't. He said, you have to. I did it because I loved our pastor. Now, I remember praying the very first day, God bless Jeff. That's about all I could say. But I did it every day. And I noticed something after a month of praying. I started to like Jeff in my heart. God had changed my heart. Now, Jeff never knew that I was praying for him every day. But in my heart, God showed me, pray for your enemies. Pray for your enemies because God will work in your heart. That was a great lesson I learned from my college minister. So, I want to share with you a couple of things. James 4:17. That's a very convicting verse. If you know the right thing to do and you do not do it, to you it is sin. If you know the right thing to do is to be a gospeler and to go and share the gospel with your friends, with your neighbors, with your colleagues, and you don't do it, to you it is sin. Looking back at my life, how much sin do I have because I didn't go, because I was not a gospeler? That's a very convicting verse. Memorize it. So what was wrong with the people that Jesus saw? He saw their lostness. They were lost. What is the world's greatest problem? Lostness. They don't know how to get to heaven. It's like that 75% I was talking about. They don't know what they need to do to get to heaven. In John chapter 6, Jesus has these words. They come to him and they say, what must What are the works of God that we must do? And Jesus gives them a great answer. I think it's John chapter 6, verse 28 and 29. He said, the works of God is this, to believe in the one he has sent. That's it. To believe in the one he has sent, to believe in Jesus. That is the work that God requires. So clear, so plain. So Jesus taught unbelievers in verse 35, which is evangelism. But he also took his disciples. He was doing both. He was sharing the gospel and he was discipling at the same time. They do go hand in hand. Go to the question on the slides that says, what are the two truths? What are the truths that Jesus taught his disciples? What are they? Let's look at that. The harvest is plentiful. This is Jesus, the Son of God, saying plentiful. How much do you think that is? A little bit? A lot. I grew up with two brothers and two sisters, and we would always be hungry and for dinner, and my mom would always say, there's plenty to go around. This is the Son of God who created everything that you see. He created all the stars and everything in the cosmos. And he's saying there is plenty. The harvest is great. The harvest is plentiful. Secondly, he says the what? What's the problem? It's you and me. That's the problem. The workers, the gospelers are few. The laborers are few. We're the problem. We're it. We're not going. We're not sharing the good news. We're not being gospelers. Let me ask you a question. Do you truly believe the harvest is plentiful? If you don't, when you go and you start to share, you will realize there are a lot of people who are interested. I want to tell you, I preached in Gettysburg. This is a while back. I preached there about evangelism and discipleship. And on the way home, I'm thinking, you're a hypocrite. You don't have a disciple. You're not making a disciple right now. And I prayed, God, give me a disciple. Before I got home, God gave me a disciple. Remember, as you go, as you pray, along the way, something might happen. So I turn onto my street, and my neighbor comes out and waves me down in the street. So I turn off my engine, I get out of the car, and we're talking. And a lull came in to our conversation. I said, and the Spirit was moving, and I was like, this is it. This is your opportunity. And I said, Matt, have you ever read the Bible? He said, maybe a couple of verses. Matt's 42. And I said, Matt, would you like to read the Bible? And he said, sure, why not? It was that easy. Just asking a question. Would you like to read the Bible? That's how easy it is. So what solution does Jesus give? He didn't say go here, does he? He says what? Pray to the Lord of the harvest. That God would send out workers. Pray to the Lord of the harvest. That's the solution. Pray. And guess what? Sometimes you might be the answer. When I was praying for missions, God started to speak to me, and I became the answer to my own prayer. God send missionaries overseas so that they can share the gospel, be gospelers. And I was that answer to my own prayer. These verses are in Matthew chapter 9, verse 38. I pray this every night as my alarm on my phone goes off. I say, God, I pray earnestly to you. By the way, I left out that word for many years, earnestly. Pray earnestly, wholeheartedly, committed to that prayer, sincerely, that God would send gospelers, that he would send workers into the harvest field. I want you to do me a favor. Look at your hands. Do they have calluses on them? Or are they soft? Look at your hands. I met a farmer recently, and he has two farms, dairy farms. And I go and shake his hands. Man, the roughest hands I've ever met, I've ever shaken. Just incredibly, just all calluses, all calluses. What does that show you? He is a hard worker. And I asked him, I said, I know farmers get up early. What time do you get up? He said, 3:30. 3:30. I said, what time do you go to bed? Like at 6 p.m.? But it shows, as gospelers, do you have the stories of sharing your faith? That's the result of being a gospeler, that you're a worker. I want to close in a few minutes on a couple of things. First of all, are you a gospeler? We need to be gospelers. We need to be. I want to read this to you. So how do we change our city? Preach the gospel today. And Jesus tells us the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. That's a numerical measurement, by the way. Jesus is telling us, hey, Christians, there's a lot of opportunity out there. There's some ripe soil out in the world. There's a lot of people who need a relationship with me. They just don't know it yet. There's a lot of people who are searching for something, and I am what they are searching for. They just need someone to shine the flashlight. There's a lot of people who are destitute, downhearted, brokenhearted, downtrodden, and they're ready and willing to receive the gospel. The harvest is bountiful. It's plentiful. They're waiting for it. They're waiting for you and me. But the problem is there are only a few people who are willing to go, to get their hands dirty, to get those spiritual calluses on their hands, to do the work. The good news is the harvest is plentiful. The bad news is us. The workers are few. Therefore, pray to the Lord of the harvest. Pray earnestly to Him that He would send out workers into His harvest field. And then comes chapter 10, when Jesus does that. He sends out His disciples into the harvest field. Would you pray with me? Father, I don't know how you're working in anybody's hearts right now. But Father, I pray that they have heard your words. Father, that the harvest is plentiful, but the problem is us. The workers are few. And you tell us the solution, to pray to you, to pray earnestly, sincerely, wholeheartedly to you, that you would send out workers into your harvest. Father, I pray for gospelers. I pray that everyone in this church would become a gospeler, if they are not already. And Father, I pray that you would equip them, that you would give them everything that they need. Sometimes it's just asking the right questions, like I asked Noah, like I asked Matt, like we asked many people. Father, I pray that you would give us the intentionality to go. And Father, I pray that if someone does not know you, they don't know who Jesus is today, Father, that they would come forward and ask. Because I do not want anybody to leave this church or even online, Father, without knowing that they are going to heaven when they die. Father, may it never be that I meet someone and don't share with them. Father, help us to be gospelers. And maybe someone is here and you're calling them to maybe go into the ministry, to maybe become a missionary. Maybe they're starting to pray about going overseas as a missionary, as a gospeler, as a church planter. Father, you need us. You want us to take the gospel forward. Father, we love you and we praise you. In Jesus' name.